Hello everyone and welcome to episode 2 of our new series here on the Four Lads podcast. This week in history. Last week Stevie was the guinea pig in the pilot show. This week we've brought in our absolute history man to help me tonight, Mr. Kenny Stewart. Kenny, how are you doing?
I'm not bad. I've just said to you off air, don't you put me in the spot that my memory's appalling. So you'll be keeping me right, Davey. But thanks for having me on.
No, it's my pleasure. And I think the first thing to say before we start is it's really good to see the comments we got in the first show. It seemed to have done relatively well, apart from a couple of Tims that's always in it, but we just ignore them, don't we?
We have to.
So, for anyone that didn't see the pilot show, the idea is that through the closed season, anyway, we'll see how it goes after that, but through the closed season, we're going to come on every Thursday, and we're going to look at the 7 days in history as far as Rangers are concerned. So on each date of that week, something that happened, good, bad or indifferent, in Rangers history. And as I said last week on the show, it might not always be triumphs and glory and silverware and stuff like that, because in 150 years, sometimes you get disappointments as well as you get triumphs, as we are well aware of right now. So the first date we're going to look is today, Thursday, May the 21st. I'm not going to go back very far. I'm not going to test you very much in this first one, Kenny. You'll be delighted to hear that. May the 21st, 2022 is the last time Rangers won the Scottish Cup. Rangers 2, Hearts 0 after extra time at Hampden, just 3 days after we had went to extra time, penalties in Seville, and just at midnight before that game finished in Seville on the Wednesday night. An absolutely knackered Rangers team came back to Hampden and actually ran the legs off Hearts for 120 minutes, incredibly. Although we didn't manage a goal until extra time. What do you remember of that day?
Exactly what you've just said. I remember thinking, how have we not won this in 90 minutes? Because we were by far the better side, and 2 sensational strikes actually that end up winning this game, wasn't it? It was Ryan Jack's right, wasn't it, that scored the goal?
Right, yeah.
Right, and it was just one of those crazy seasons, wasn't it, that you come back off of the game on a Wednesday night and you feel, we've really got to win something here. And there was just a determination about them that day that they were not going to let that slip. And it was the least they deserved that season, Davey, because it was a cracking season,
yeah,
in general. But that particular game, it was one of them. I don't know if you were the same, but in the build up to that, you're like, how do you pick yourself up after the heartache of the Wednesday? Because it was so devastating. But soon cheered myself up when the goals went in. We were picking up a trophy, mate. It was, no more than they deserved. Put it that way.
Yeah, we didn't get back from Seville till the Thursday late morning, and we hadn't slept all night. Slept all day Thursday, and I don't know how the players, man. I mean, all we did was watch a game across in Spain. I just don't know how they had the energy left after, because that must have been the most physically and mentally exhausting night of their lives, that Europa League final. I thought they were outstanding in when I think back on it. A few
should have won that game, Davey. When you look back on it, we should have won it.
Yeah, I think it's only 4 years ago, but I think if you ask people now, I bet they couldn't remember the team that day, for example, because the game came so soon after the game. We all remember that it probably slips off. So, for example, who all remembers that Amad Diallo started that game?
Not me. That's why I shouldn't be on this show. I have no recollection of stuff like this, and you tell me that has actually surprised me completely, because I genuinely don't remember that.
Don't quote me on this. It might have been him that Scott Wright come on for. I can't remember that much, but I remember Diallo started it. I remember Stephen Davis started it as well. I think I'm sure Kamara was on the bench and Stephen Davis played. Barisic didn't play at all. Bassi moved back to left back. Big Balogun come back in at centre half. I thought Bassey was absolutely incredible that day. He was up and down that left wing. That would be his last ever game for us because we sold him in the summer.
He had a habit of playing well at Hampden right enough, didn't he? The semi-final of that year, he was absolutely phenomenal that day as well. But yeah, just it's incredible to think this week, you look at that and with James Tavernier and Leon King both going, there's not a member of that squad left now. Davey, not a single member of that squad left.
No, there won't be.
Incredible.
Well, there is one player that played that day still at Ibrox, isn't there? John Suter.
Beg your pardon, you're right, so he did.
They were trying to catch. I thought you were trying to catch me out there, actually. They had Suter, they had Barry Mackay, I'm pretty sure Andy Halliday, I think, came on that day. I think they had 2 or 3 players that have played for us before or after. But it's quite depressing, actually, to think that that's 4 years ago. We've only won 1 trophy since. And I mean, how many managers have we had since as well? And it just seems to have went downhill rapidly year on year ever since. It's about time that we get back to getting the habit of lifting shiny things above our head at the end of the season, doesn't it?
It's a sliding doors moment, that Europa League final, isn't it, Davey? Because I'm fully aware that the Stuart Robertson at the time ended up telling us after it that the Champions League wasn't going to be worth as much money to us as we first thought. But the talk at the time was that particular game was an £80 million game for us because of the prize money involved, the Champions League, the Super League involvement. It was, and we missed a trick. And when you look at it, it is, as I say, for me, it's just a sliding doors moment and a real missed opportunity because we should have won that game. And I don't know how you feel about that, but for me, I look at that and think 4 years, and it feels an awful lot longer to me.
Oh, it does.
And it does genuinely, because we have been a bit of a, I'm going to say, but a bit of a shambles, actually. When you look at it over the piece, we've not done nearly enough. 1 League Cup in that time, a Premier Sports Cup or whatever they call it these days, buddy. But it's not good enough, is it? And when you think a European final 4 years ago to finish in third this season, it's not good enough at all. When we need the owners and the head coach, to sort this out, because it's not acceptable when you look at the kind of, I'm not saying a downfall, but the lack of success we've had over the last few years. It's not good enough.
I don't know if you remember the last minute. Do you remember the last minute at Hampden that day in extra time? That we were 2-0 up. We brought Alan McGregor on. Everybody thought it was going to be his farewell game. We clapping him on, saying cheerio to him, and then he stayed the next season. Which was mental, and I do remember it, actually. I remember it very well. As soon as you said that, I knew what you were going to say. But everybody, including he felt that was him done, and he's been persuaded to stay the extra year. And it's one of those things that I admire loyalty. However, I think that this has been part of my issue with Rangers over the past few years. Is we've been a wee bit too loyal to certain individuals, and I just feel sometimes you've got to have that ruthless streak as a football club where there can be no sentiment's a great thing, but you can't be overly sentimental about anything. You've got to make the correct decisions when it comes to moving forward. And it was a strange one because I always remember thinking, do you know what? I don't know who you believe your greatest ever Rangers goalie is, but for me it's Andy Gorham. But won't say me disagree with you, Kenny.
But we've done this in your first and favourites before, haven't we? But he's a very close second. He genuinely is, and a genuine legend of the football club. And it's funny that when you look back in that, and he did come on a minute to go, and he was waving at everybody, and it's crazy, isn't it? And he stayed the other year, as you say. Yeah,
I'll give you one quick stat about Alan McGregor, which I don't know if a lot of folk know it, but Rangers won the Scottish Cup 5 times with Alan McGregor in the squad. 2002, he was a substitute and didn't come on. 2003, he was a substitute, didn't come on. 2008, he missed the game injured. 2009, Walter Smith dropped him in the end of the season with Barry Ferguson. Put him on the bench for disciplinary reasons, so he didn't play in the final. And then 2022, he came on for the last minute. So he's got 4 Scottish Cup winners' medals, and he's only played 1 minute.
That is insane. That is a proper stat. You'd catch just about everybody out with that, Davey. Particularly me, because I'm useless with that kind of stuff. But that's mad, actually, when you think about it. 4 medals, played 1 minute of football.
Yeah.
4 Cup winners' medals. It's absolutely insane. I didn't know that at all. I'm kind of flabbergasted at that, I've got to say.
I like to throw these little curveballs in this show. I think I like to kid on and clever. So that was May the 21st. There's only really one place we can go in May the 22nd. We're going to go to Easter Road, May the 22nd, 2005. The day that the helicopter changed direction. Rangers went into the last day of the season 2 points behind Celtic. Rangers were at Hibs, Celtic were at Motherwell. Rangers were playing against Hibs, who were managed by Tony Mowbray, who was an ex-Celtic player. Celtic were playing Motherwell, who was managed by Terry Butcher, who was an ex-Rangers player. Rangers won 1-0. Celtic were 1-0 up with, 30 seconds to go, 40 seconds to go. Conceded twice, lost 2-1. Rangers won the title. The helicopter went from Lanarkshire to Edinburgh, and probably the most incredible ending to a league season there's ever been in Scotland. You must remember that day fondly, Helicopter Sunday.
I very much do. Certainly the game. I don't remember much of that night, mate, because I remember celebrating a lot that particular night with a crowd of my mates, and it was wonderful. Do you know my abiding? There's a number of things about that game that my abiding memory of that is Big Eck turning and going, it's done, and going like that constantly. Right. It just rings round in your head when I think of that game. That's one of the memory or the images that I have in my head. It's the deflected goal for Nacho Novo. It's the fact that last 22, 23 minutes, Hibs are happy, we're happy, and it's one of the most insanely weird games of football in the last 20 minutes or so that you're ever going to watch, where they know they've qualified for Europe. We know there's nothing we can do in the other stadium, so everybody's perfectly happy with how things are going, and it was just surreal. And I do remember the celebrations that night. I'm only joking. It was just wonderful, because you'll remember more than most, same as I do, that particular. We didn't fancy that at all getting into that game. It was just a foregone conclusion that Celtic would get the result that they were needing. And I can still see wee Scott McDonald's 2 goals, and still makes me laugh every time I think of them, because it broke their wee hearts, didn't it? And it was wonderful.
Yeah, and up until this week, I used to always say one of the things I liked most about it was it sent Martin O'Neill home as a loser, but unfortunately things have changed since then. But I used to go to the football then with my son and one of my friends, and we got 3 tickets for Easter Road. My son was 14 at the time, and he's never forgiven me since, but I sold his ticket. They were something ridiculous, like 32 quid each. And I had, when you say I had no confidence, I thought it was a completely dead game. I thought we were going to hear about Celtic winning the league, and we're all going to trudge home for Edinburgh with our faces tripping us. So I didn't see the point in spending I think it was because I was paying for my ticket as well. I mean, 64 quid to go and watch Rangers winning nothing. So I said to my pal, if you can find somebody else for this ticket of my son's, just give him it. It's fine. We'll just go up through him. My son has not forgiven me to this day. It took him about a month to talk to me after that day. When we ended up, we had seats in the very front row of the back of the stand. So we were actually leaning on the the little shelf at the front, and there was the three of us sitting there, and a guy to our right who had one of those Sony Walkmans or something they called on, with little headphones on, a radio with headphones on it. And as you said, the last 20 minutes of the game was the most mind-numbingly boring thing you've ever watched in your life. It was like two centre-halves passed the ball to each other for 5 minutes, then they lumped it up the park, then the other two centre-halves passed the ball for 5 minutes, then they lumped it up the park. So nothing was happening. And then suddenly this guy 2 seats down from me with the headphones on almost went right over the stand into the bottom, but he just managed to stop himself because he shot up like an absolute rocket. And then all around us, other people were all shooting up like rockets. As my God, Motherwell must have scored. So lo and behold, that last 2 or 3 minutes was just absolutely. There's been nothing like it ever. I don't think there'll be anything like it ever again. But I still have this little regret that I didn't take my boy to it, because it would have been an even better day if he'd been there.
Well, if I was your boy, I still wouldn't be talking to me. I'll tell you that. But
I ended up paying to take him to 2 European finals to make up for it. It cost me a fortune.
Fair, isn't it? But I wasn't at the game that day. But what I do remember is what I've already said to you there. But see that point about what you were saying about somebody with the wee headphones on and all that, or the wee tranny or whatever. The amount of times it panned to the Rangers support and the amount of people that were sitting there, what's going on over there? That makes me chuckle as well, because, as I say, watching it on the TV, and you'll maybe not remember this because you were at the game, but obviously both games were on simultaneously. Yeah. So I'm watching the Rangers game. I wouldn't watch them if Rangers were on. I wouldn't watch them at all, but obviously Rangers are on, so I'm watching that. I've no clue what's going on, and you know that way you can easily flick and see what's happening, but I didn't. And I always remember, my son was with me, and he was a wee boy at the time. He'd have been about 7, I think, right. And just getting into his football, if you know what I mean. And that instant that roar came up, that first roar. The second roar was insane, actually, if you remember. But the first roar.
We actually thought the second roar originally was the final whistle. Because we couldn't believe Motherwell could have scored twice in that space of time. We thought that was the game done.
Because it was basically up the park and they scored again. If you remember, they literally kicked off, somebody launched it, gave it away, one ball over the top and another goal. But that's my abiding memory of it. It was bouncing about, my wee boy getting to experience that, if you know what I mean, just being old enough, and as I say, being so dramatic and kind of trying to explain to him, like, it's not always like that, son. You know, it's not quite as exciting as that. But what a day that was, David, because you do look at it, and I've always said this about Big Alex McLeish, that I was never a massive fan of the way we played under Big Alex, I've got to be honest. But I always look at it and say, with the way the football club was and the downsizing that had been going on, how he managed to achieve what he did is just beyond me when you actually stop and consider, you know, he was doing the job with one hand tied behind his back a lot of the time, because it was such a difficult situation that the club were in at the time, and an owner at the time had given up. So fair play to Big McLeish. There's just no denying that he is another legend of the football club for me, because of how he managed to do what he did. 2 trebles. 2 trebles. No, I did a double and a treble.
He won the 2 cups. He won the 2 cups in the first season and won a treble the second season.
That's right. And you just look at it and you think, you know, where are we at now? That's the kind of thing that I look at and say, well, how can a guy like that achieve with the resources that he had available? And you look at it now in comparison with Martin O'Neill there now, and the resources that Rangers have available, and with, you know, the culture they talk about in the football club. Well, we know where we're going wrong, really, don't we? I think is my kind of take on it, Davey. I think at the start of the Helicopter Sunday season, the summer before it, when we had won nothing the year before, all the talk then was, we need leaders.
We need experience. We need guys that know the club. That was actually the things we said the previous summer. Remember, and he brought in the likes of Marvin Andrews, and he brought in Alec Ray, maybe, and Big Boomsong, who he sold, and Kiriakos ended up replacing him. Posso up front, Novo. He brought in guys that either knew the league or had a lot of experience, but guys that didn't like losing, guys that were kind of winners. And for me, it just kind of, it's like history almost repeating itself. We're looking again at another rebuild similar to what he had to do that before that season, when he had a team with a lot of good individuals in it, but it didn't have that spine that you needed to win things. And he put the spine in it that year. And I think there's a lot of lesson for history about what this season's rebuild needs to be.
The parallels are there actually when you look at it, aren't they? And I always remember Big McLeish did that. What he did, if you remember, Marvin Andrews. There was an old saying when Marvin played for us. He was good at heading the ball the way he was facing. That's what he was. He did his job, and that was it. You know. You look at Nacho Nova, as you say, knew the league. He had Alec Ray, even a diehard, you know, and he put a will to win and a determination. He also made us bigger physically, if I remember right. He went out his way to buy or to sign a few guys that were big that year as well. And yeah, as I say, the comparisons and the parallels are very much there in terms of where we're at the moment.
Yeah, so that's the first 2 days down, and it's two pretty good days. Let's be honest. Winning the Scottish Cup and then winning the league title in the last minute of the season. I'm going to go to May the 23rd, going a little bit further back. So you'd be but a boy at the time, so I don't know what you remember of this, to be honest with you. But May the 23rd, 1978, Jock Wallace resigned as the Rangers manager just a fortnight after winning the treble, and Rangers announced that he would be replaced by club captain John Gregg, who retired as a player and became the manager at the age of 35. So, do you remember that day at all?
I'd be lying if I say I remember it like distinctly, if you know what I mean. But I remember it happening, if you know what I mean by that. Yeah. I was very aware of it happening, but I don't remember the announcement or anything like that, no. But, I mean, I've talked to you and discussed this with you about Jock Wallace before, and to me, he's up there with the greatest managers we've ever had, without question. And and when I look back and, you know, it's a lot of the footage of Big Jock now, I just think, you know, it's a bygone era and all that. We understand that, but by goodness, did he know Rangers, and did he make sure that everybody around about him did as well?
Yeah, well, I was still at school in 1978. I think I was in third year at school. In fact, I'm sure I was sitting my prelims, I think, at the time. If there is such a thing as prelims anymore, I've no idea, but they were called prelims in my day. You get time off to study, and I was off during the day, and I had the radio on, and it came on the radio news that Rangers had confirmed that Jock Wallace had left. I could honestly, it was like hit my boat of lightning. It was just one of these things nobody could have seen it coming. He was such an absolute hero of the Rangers supporters, and he was one of us. We never ever thought he wanted to go anywhere else, and we never ever found out definitively the reason why he did resign. He was always a man that would never say anything that would bring Rangers down in any way, so he would rather just say nothing than say anything that was critical of Rangers. I think now, look, I know there's been lots of stories that he fell out with Wally Waddle and stuff like that, or signing policies and stuff, but I think it was as simple as he got an offer of a lot more money by a team down in England, and Rangers decided that he wasn't worth a pay rise to match it, so he just left because he was going to get paid better. I think it was actually as simple as that. But as you say, what a man, what a manager, what a leader. 2 trebles in 3 seasons. And he built a team that everybody talked about how he was into fitness and he was into character and all that and teamwork, and he absolutely was. He learned all that in the army. But see, when you look at the players that he had for a long time in the 70s, the number of them that played way into their mid-30s and even their late 30s, when at a time that players didn't usually play beyond 32 or 33. Sandy Jardine was playing at 38. Alan McDonald was Hearts player manager at 37. John Gregg he played to 35. Colin Jackson played for ages. Tom Forsyth played for ages. Tom McLean played for ages. Alec Miller played for ages. I think he extended lots and lots of players' careers. But the thing that, you know how much I love Jock Wallace, the thing I always think is a bit unfair is the fact he is only remembered as this kind of sergeant major type. He's only remembered as this guy that made them up in the running down sandhills and had them thrown up in pre-season training and all that stuff. Jock Wallace was a manager that played really entertaining football. And I remember him first and foremost for winning things with Rangers, but for entertaining me as well. I mean, he bought many wingers did he buy? He bought Quinton Young, he bought Bobby McKean, he bought Davy Cooper, he bought Ted McMahon. He gave young players a chance, your Bobby Russells, your Ian Durant, your Derek Fergusons. And I just thought he was a tremendous manager for our football club. And it breaks my heart that he wasn't in the 150-year mural. Remember when they brought the 150 years out and they had all the different managers on it? He wasn't in it. Stephen Gerrard was there and the various others, but he wasn't. And I always think, that's just not right, because he is assistant manager for the Cup Winners' Cup as well. Let's not forget he was the tactical brains behind the Cup Winners' Cup winning team. He's just a hero, man, an absolute hero.
Yeah, I know that. And the thing that I would always say is that, how would you say it? Very, very difficult not to, agree with everything you've said there. But what I would point to is that he left to go to Leicester, if I remember right, wasn't it? And the Leicester fans and Leicester as a football club, even to this day, I've got nothing but great praise for him. When he came back and he left again and he went to Seville, I believe, wasn't it? He went to Sevilla and they've got nothing but great things to say about him. And it's the kind of mark of the man that he commanded respect. And I'm absolutely with you in this, because I've said that to you before on your first and favourite show, Davey, that he's the first manager that I can ever remember Rangers having. And being that such a domineering kind of character, and being almost as a wee boy, being really intimidated by that, and then to go back to the kind of the day that he left, and we were told that John Gregg was going to be the manager. And I'm thinking as a wee boy, that'll be great. He's a captain. He's going to be, and we know how that went. But the point being that I'm totally with you on this, and I think it's a period that Rangers in general don't get the respect that they deserve for. So, and as you say, some of the football we were playing, but just as a club, because they had went through their 9 in a row and stuff like that, I don't think that Rangers get quite the credit for being such a phenomenal football team under Jock Wallace. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, actually.
I actually think Big Jock was his own worst enemy sometimes when it came to, see, because he was so gruff and so scary, and he kept talking about fitness and character and things. So I think that's the way that other people thought that he thought, if you know what I mean. He was a football man, and I actually think one of my favourite things that I've ever done in this particular podcast ever since I've joined it. Remember, I managed to interview Jock's son. That was I interviewed Willie Matheson a few weeks ago, which was an absolute total highlight of my life. But John Wallace, and he's such a chip off his dad's old block. It was so good to interview him, and he's still so incredibly proud of the things that his dad achieved, and no wonder. And he's even proud of Jock being the Berwick manager that knocked us out the Scottish Cup, which I'm not 100% sure Big Jock would ever want to admit to in his later life. But Jock Wallace resigned on May the 23rd, 1978, and Rangers didn't win the league for 9 years after it. And I think that says something as well, doesn't it?
Speaks volumes, doesn't it? It genuinely speaks volumes.
Yeah. So that was May the 23rd. There's only one place you can go May 24th. I don't know if anybody watching this has twigged what May the 24th is. May the 24th is the most important date in Rangers history in terms of winning trophies. because May the 24th, 1972 is the night Rangers won the European Cup Winners' Cup in Barcelona when they beat Moscow Dynamo 3-2. I wasn't there this time. That's a wee bit before your time, I would think, Kenny. Just not quite one for you. But so the European Cup Winners' Cup triumph in 1972. My abiding memory of that night. What was I? I was 8, almost 9. I was 8 years old at the time. Is that, and people these days will not believe this, but it wasn't on the telly. And it wasn't on the telly because Scotland were playing Wales at Hampden that night in the home internationals, the old home international tournament. And the SFA had a rule back then that the only time a game could be on TV is if there was no other football in Scotland for it to interfere with potentially folk deciding to watch the telly rather than going to the game. So it was only shown as a delayed transmission at 10 o'clock after the Scotland game was finished. And because I was only 8 years old and had school the next day, my old mum said to me, "You can't stay up and watch that, it's too late." So my old man managed to ride to the rescue and basically say, "Well, I'll tell you what, if he goes to his bed for a couple of hours while the game's on, we'll wake him up at 9:45 and he can come down and watch it with me in the living room." Job done, right? But they couldn't have possibly expected me to go to sleep while Rangers were playing in a European final. So I found the house transistor radio. I took it up to my bedroom and was listening under the covers, listening to because it was on radio. And I totally busted myself when Colin Steen scored because I cheered and my mother realised what I was doing. So that was me. But lo and behold, I did manage to watch the game. But 1972, 11 players, 11 all-time legends. I just wish that we had more than 11 we were talking about by this time as had won a European trophy. But when I look back at that now, I was at many games. My dad took me to the first round game against the French team, Rennes. I was at that game. I was at the Sporting Lisbon game in the second round. I didn't go to the Torino game for some reason. I can't remember why that was. I think my dad was working. And I was at the semi-final against Bayern Munich. And 80,000 inside Ibrox against a team with Gerd Müller, Franz Beckenbauer, Uli Hoeneß, Paul Breitner, Sepp Maier. I think there's a decent shout to say that they were the best team any Scottish team has ever knocked out of Europe. They were a sensational team. 6 of them won the European Championship with West Germany that summer. 6 of them won the World Cup with West Germany 2 years later. And most of them were still in the Bayern team when they won 3 European Cups in a row just after it. They were absolutely top drawer, and we gave them a doing that night. So I know you don't remember it actually happening, but what's your thoughts on the Barcelona Bears?
Oh, they're the greatest, the greatest team in our history, aren't they? They have to be. You're the only team to win a European trophy, Davy. And I've watched listen, I'll just give you a clue. I was 25 months old, and my mum is never tired of embarrassing me, saying it took me 18 months to learn to walk. So I was barely walking at the time, mate. So it's one of these things that, having watched the footage, when did I first ever actually see that full game, Davey? That would have been quite late at the time of video recorders, if you know what I mean. That's when I first managed to ever be able to watch that game.
And I think most of us have never seen it in colour.
No, I've never seen it in colour. Genuinely, I've never seen it in colour. And I genuinely think I must have been 15 or something like that, but 16 before I actually managed to, maybe a wee bit younger than that, maybe 14, actually thinking about it, because it was definitely kind of that, kind of third year kind of age, I think. And it was a crowd of us. Me and a crowd of my pals all sat in a mate of mine, I think it was at Adam's house, up at my mate Adam's house, and we sat and we watched this. And I just remember looking at it, and first of all, the grainy footage and stuff like that is difficult to kind of, on an old VHS was difficult. But at the same time, Davey, I can always remember the quality of the goals for a start. Some of these goals are just phenomenal. you know, and the quality of play and just looking at even that team, and you look how so many of that team were still kicking about years later. You know, you actually look at that and say, you know, it's testament, as you say, to Big Jock there that they were all that fit. And I know Willie Waddle was there, but you know what I mean? It's testament to
He's one that trained the team.
Aye, exactly. It's testament to Big Jock there that so many of these guys, as you say, were still playing in the late 70s when this is the early 70s. And you've just got nothing but admiration. And I'm going to give you a wee plug for your Willie Matheson interview. It's just phenomenal. It is. It's just, I'd urge anyone watching this, go and listen and hear it straight from the horse's mouth. Yeah. The man was an absolute gentleman as well, and just a lovely guy, and you're just in awe of guys like that, aren't you? That an old fella now in his 80s who can look back and say, "Do you know I did that? You know I did that," and you just think, "Wow!" So nothing but the hugest admiration for that team, for everybody concerned, because we've been to 5 finals, Davey, and it's the only one we've won. Yeah, and we did deserve that one. There's no doubt in that. And as you say, I've also watched the Bayern Munich game, and I have seen that in colour. Aye, and we gave them a doing, and we did at Ibrox. That was a hosing, and it was 2-0, and it could have been, well, if you're being fair, 4-5 easy.
That was the night Willie Johnson sat in the ball. That's my abiding memory of that night.
And you just look at it and think, you know, halcyon days for us, Davey. That's true, but just as I say, far too young to have watched it live, but I have certainly watched it many times over the years. And as I say, I don't want to go too gushing, but it is one of them that you just go, well, absolutely. It's the greatest team we ever had.
And I'll probably finish with this one by saying that because they weren't able to show the trophy off to the fans after the game because of the pitch invasion. There's another topical conversation. Although this game actually did get finished, there was definitely a final whistle in the other game, right, before anybody argues with that. Because of that, they decided to come back the next night and parade the trophy around Ibrox. And I always remember John Gregg, Willie Waddle and all the team, and it was like a coal lorry they were in. I can't think of another way of describing it. It's like a coal lorry. And it was absolutely pouring with rain, and yet there was about 40,000 folk in Ibrox still watching this coal lorry. That's how big an achievement it was. It was just sensational. So that was May the 24th. So there's the only way you can go is down after May the 24th, because there isn't an up from that. I'm afraid I'm going to go back a wee bit further for May the 25th. So even I don't really remember this one, but if my old dad was alive, he'd insist on me doing this one. May the 25th, 1965, I'm going to describe it as an end of an era. Because May the 25th, 1965 is when Rangers sold Jim Baxter to Sunderland for a record fee of £72,500. Jim Baxter, my dad's ultimate Rangers player. I'll just throw a few facts in. Maybe that's what I'll do. So Jim Baxter joined Rangers in 1960, and he joined a really, really good Rangers team. He joined the Rangers team, Richie Shearer, Caldo, Harold Davis, Ian McMillan, Miller, Brand Wilson. He joined a team that was full of great footballers. That Rangers team he joined weren't the league champions. Hearts were the league champions. Rangers had only won one of the previous 3 league titles. They'd only won one of the last 7 Scottish Cups, and they hadn't won the League Cup for more than a decade. Despite the fact they had all the great players in it, Baxter was the missing piece of the jigsaw. He was the playmaker that team needed. And when he joined, they won 3 league titles in 4 years. They won 3 Scottish Cups in 4 years and 4 League Cups in 5 years. And I say it that way because he broke his leg after the League Cup final that next season. And then we went on to not win anything after that. He was the sprinkling of stardust, for want of a better expression, in a really good team. And I think it's really telling that the generation before me, the team that loved that early 60s team, almost to a man, they'll tell you the best player in that team was Jim Baxter. Almost to a man. They might not say he's a favourite player because he wasn't the most professional. He obviously wasn't a great Rangers man the way that a lot of the other ones were. But they all say he's the best footballer. And I think there's an argument, actually, he was possibly the best Scottish footballer there's ever been. There might be an argument for that. I'll give you one wee quick story about him that sums up the kind of man that he was. The great Sir Stanley Matthews had a testimonial in 1965. Stanley Matthews in his 50s by this time. He played against all the great players in the world, and every great player in the world wanted to play in Stanley Matthews' testimonial. So old Stanley was able to invite all the great players of the time to play in his testimonial game. The likes of the England team with Jimmy Greaves and Bobby Moore and all these guys. And then there was Eusebio, there was Puskas, there was Bobby Charlton, George Bed, all these players were all there. 2 Rangers players get invited to it. Willie Henderson and Jim Baxter. And Willie Henderson tells this great story about it. He got the invite and he said to Baxter, Jim, we're going to play with Puskas. We're going to play with Eusebio. My God. And Baxter just said to him, aye, but they're going to play with me. Arrogance, self-confidence, what a player. And the thing was, when he left in 1965, Jock Stein had just become the Celtic manager. And I think 1965, those 2 events, Stein arriving at Celtic and Baxter leaving Rangers, are what tipped football in Glasgow from one side completely the other way. And Stein just said in an interview just after he joined, when his team found out Baxter had been sold, there was a massive party. The whole squad were celebrating because Baxter played against Celtic 18 times, and that first time he was a Rangers player, he lost the first one and only lost one more. He only lost 2 at 18 and he lost the first one. He was special.
Very special player. He is before my time, Davey. However,
I know that. I was brought up with stories of him right now.
Aye, but what I am going to say is that you'll remember the old Rangers Gold videos and all that used to be out. If you remember them.
Yes.
And that's where you get your footage from. That's where we got our footage of guys like that from. And the talent is undeniable. The stories are legendary. And some of the antics of the guy was just utterly bonkers. But what you've got to do is actually look at his peers and hear what they have to say about or had to say about him. And there is no question on this. I've tried to liken this before when somebody's asked me about Jim Baxter, and I'd say, like, for my era, when I was younger, it would have been a Loudrop or a Gascoigne or something like that. Yeah. A Haitley or a McCoy, whoever your favourite was at that time, he was in those echelons, right at the very highest echelons of the football club in terms of ability and talent. And as I say, you can even look at the 3-2 game at Wembley when he's playing for Scotland and what he's doing with that, his keepy-uppies and all the rest of it. And the footage is, again, it's one of those things that I would always urge younger Rangers supporters, if you're watching this, go and read a book about Jim Baxter or that era. Go and learn about it, because it gives you a grounding, because it's what I did when I was a kid, but it gives you a grounding as a supporter and an understanding of what our football club actually is. And, we're talking again about a culture today and saying we've lost our way. Yeah. Well, we very much have. And guys like this who, as you say, wasn't he a great Rangers man or anything like that? People kind of forget Jim Baxter wasn't. However, he was one of those guys that had that talent that, as I say, you sit and listen. I used to listen to old uncles or something like that, and they would just tell you, best player I've ever seen. That's how good he was. And it's quite an accolade that when people, from that era, when Scottish football was at its very, very peak and pomp, if you like, in from the 60s, effectively, when you look at all the clubs doing incredibly well, for him to be up there and regarded as the very best of them all is quite an accolade, isn't it? And you'll know this as well, but go and listen or read Dennis Law's book when he's talking about Jim Baxter and what he thought of him. It's incredible.
I can imagine what he must have thought. They were they weren't just teammates. They were buddies on and off the park, I think. I think I actually saw Baxter, but it was when he came back. He came back briefly right at the end of the 60s, and my dad took me to a game that he played in just because Jim Baxter was in it. So he insisted that I went to, and I remember for my sins, I was only about 5 or something, 5 or 6. I can't remember who they were playing. I can't remember anything about it. But the only thing I do remember, because my dad always cast it up to me for the rest of my life, was the first thing I said when he pointed Jim Baxter to me. I said, "Oh, is it the fat guy?"
To be fair, you weren't wrong though, were you?
No, I know that, but
the innocence of childhood.
I think, for want of a better expression, he probably was the closest thing Scottish football's ever had to George Best, in that he had all the natural ability in the world, but he didn't have the professionalism, and it meant that he retired before he was 30. What Jim Baxter could have done with a Jock Wallace, actually, when I think about it, instead of somebody that let him do whatever the hell he wanted, he maybe should have had someone like a Jock Wallace looking after him when he was a bit younger, because he might have gotten more in the straight and narrow. But one of the great Rangers players. So there's only 2 days to go, May 26th, May 27th. So I don't know if you watched the first show, Kenny, but I finished the first show with a really, really old one. I want to try and make this cover as much of Rangers history as I can. I couldn't find one for May the 27th, but I found one for May the 26th. So I'm going to do the really old one second last instead of last, unfortunately. I'm sorry, because you obviously don't know. You won't be able to contribute too much to this, but May the 26th, 1904. So end of it says, I remember this one. Obviously, they're at it. So this is actually a game from a tour. A tour. Rangers done one of their first ever foreign tours in 1904. And they went to Vienna. A team called 1st Vienna were celebrating their 10th anniversary, and they held a little tournament, and they invited a team from Denmark called Bold Club and Rangers to celebrate, and done a little 3-team tournament. Now, Rangers were professional, the other 2 teams were amateur, so needless to say, Rangers hammered them, as they did back then. They played this team, Bold Club, on May the 23rd, not May the 26th, and beat them 9-0. But the game was ruined by a really heavy rainstorm, and the pitch turned into a quagmire. The referee stopped the game early. The fans all disappeared before it was finished. It was absolutely pouring down. So they decided to play it again 3 days later and let people come in and see the game properly the second time. But the Rangers manager, William Wilton, had a game again come soon after it, and he decided to play a lot of the reserve team that he'd taken across to him for the first time. So he played a lot of fringe players. But he only had one goalkeeper with him. So he asked 1st Vienna if he could play Vienna's goalkeeper instead. A guy called Karol Pikarna went in Rangers' goal that day, a young Austrian. And he became the first overseas, the first foreign player ever to play a game for Rangers. Rangers won 5-3, and Pikarna really impressed William Wilton, who was the manager at the time, and impressed the watching Rangers team, because most of the first team actually watched the game rather than played it. And they thought, we're going to remember this boy. This boy's really good. Fast forward it to December 1904. Rangers won a title race with Celtic. William Wilton had a goalkeeper called Tom Sinclair, but he didn't think he had much of a backup for him. He contacted 1st Vienna and asked if he could have Karol Pikarna. Offered Karol Pikarna £2 a week to turn professional, because they were all amateur. Pikarna came across to Scotland, signed till the end of the season, and became the first foreign player to play for a British team. Not just for Rangers, for a British team. He stayed till the end of the season. He only played one first team game because Tom Sinclair stayed in the team. So he was just a backup. He played against Queen's Park in a competition at the time called the Glasgow League. Kept a clean sheet, 1-2-0. But he was homesick and went back home at the end of the season. But this big long story basically is trying to say Carol Picarna's got this little place in Rangers history that nobody can take away from him, which is that he was the first overseas player ever to wear the Rangers jersey. And when you think about football now, it's actually Spot the Scotsman, whereas back then, a foreign player was big news.
That's a wonderful story. A genuinely wonderful story that I have never heard before, Davey. I've never heard of that tour. I've never heard of that player. I've never heard the story at all. And it's genuinely what makes, for me anyway, it's wee stories like this that make Rangers so special for me, because I'm not like you, mate. I've not got a photographic memory when it comes to Rangers. And you genuinely do, and you've got that that knowledge of history about our football club that I'm quite envious of, because I when I was younger, I didn't have the inclination to do it, and I don't have the time to sit and study it now, if you know what I mean. Yep. But I'd love to be able to do that, because wee stories like that just melt my heart, mate. I actually find that wonderful, but genuinely a wonderful story.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because Vienna, it wasn't even Austria, wasn't even the country at the time, it was Austria-Hungary. And Prague, which we think is the Czech Republic, was actually part of Austria-Hungary. There was no such places, the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia back then. Europe was a completely different place. But Karol Picarna. Funny enough, the poor guy suffered for joining Rangers for years, because when he went back home, the football was amateur, and because he had earned £2 a week at Rangers, he was regarded as a professional and they wouldn't let him play. It took him about 2 years to get his professional status taken away so he could play again. So I hope he thought his one game for the Rangers first team was worth it. And a very brief postscript to his story is that he actually ended up going to Bavaria to play for a little amateur team called Bayern Munich. Because they weren't the team that we think they are now. They were just this little provincial team.
Is that for real? Yeah.
Yeah, played for Bayern.
Wow.
When they were
insane, isn't it?
I know. The little things that come up in Rangers history I find absolutely fascinating. I find it fascinating. So, but we'll finish with May the 27th, and you definitely remember, because I've done too many that are too long ago. This will be the last one, I promise. May the 27th in the year 2000 was the Orange Cup final at Hampden. Rangers versus Aberdeen. Rangers had just won the league by 21 points. Aberdeen had finished last and only didn't get relegated because Falkirk Stadium wasn't accepted for the Premier League, or the Premiership, I would call it back then. Jim Leighton's last professional game as a player, he lasted 2 minutes, 3 minutes maybe. Broke his jaw. Robbie Winters went in goal, and basically the orange hordes on the terracings just had a party for all day, because there was no way Aberdeen were going to win from that moment onwards. Brian Bronker scored in the first half, and then we scored 3 goals in space of about 5 minutes at the start of the second half. 4-0 party time. Were you there that day?
I was, yes. And I'll tell you something. For all that we did have a party that day, that Robbie Winters actually played really well, didn't he? It was genuinely one of the weirdest things. He was a striker, if I remember right, wasn't he?
He was, and he wasn't even all that big. He was one of the last ones, I imagine, getting in goals.
But I remember, particularly the second half, if I remember right, he made a couple of absolutely blinding saves. There was one, he was at full stretch and he tips over the bar. Do you remember that? And it was absolutely insane that you're looking at giving it. It's actually pretty decent. But that was a party, and that was one of those in tribute to Dick Advocat and the Dutch boys that we had there, and it was a sea of orange, wasn't it? It was just wonderful. Yeah. But again, you look at that and you say, do you know, there was something about that, but the sun was blazing, I think, if I remember right, wasn't it? It was a sunny day, and it was just absolutely incredible. And yeah, I could be doing with some more of them, Davey. That's the thing. I really could.
Yeah, but I must admit, if I look back to that day, my son was with me that day as well. I managed to get a ticket for him. He painted his face orange as well as wore a orange shirt. It was, I think all the kids were doing that day. We thought we were absolutely uncatchable at that time. See that second Advocat season when we won the league by miles and miles. It felt at the time we'd done reasonably well in Europe. We had the Bayern Munich, Valencia, and who was the other team in the group? Bayern Munich, Valencia, PSV Eindhoven, and we almost qualified for that group. We felt as if we were on a different level for everybody else, and yet within a year we'd won nothing. it was incredible. But it's just how
the next season we actually finished something like 18 points behind them.
Oh, we were miles behind. Yeah,
it was literally a 40-point swing. It was nuts. But I think
maybe that's maybe one little lesson, that even when we say how rubbish we are, if you get it absolutely right in a summer, like Celtic did in the summer after that, and we got it wrong in the summer after that, it shows you how quick it can turn.
Exactly, and that's there's always hope. There's always, you just keep the faith, mate. That's what you do. But when you look at that was you're spot on when you're saying that about we thought we were untouchable. Actually, and for the younger folk watching this again, Advocaat's team played some wonderful football. They really did play a nice brand of football, and we had quality players, top quality players, but we were paying through the nose for them. So to be fair, at that time that we were paying transfer fees that would only last season we were contemplating paying since that day, really, if you remember it. So we had a cracking team. That Champions League that season, if you remember right, and genuinely we should have beat Bayern home and away. The Valencia team was the team that we there's a wee quick story. Do you remember that the Scottish media calling them the Aberdeen of Spanish football, because they hadn't won any of their first 2 or 3 games, and we turned up in the old Mestalla Stadium, if you remember that, and they gave us a hiding. Do you remember that? It was, and you're like, wow, what a team! And I was at the game at Ibrox where, what was the boy's name that scored?
The player I remember is Mendy.
Anyway, the point being, they had some wonderful players and they were a phenomenal team. But we should have qualified from that group. Valencia got to the final that year, if I remember it, didn't they? It was Real Madrid that beat them 3-0 in that final.
They got to the final that year and the next year. I think they beat 2 finals in a row, didn't they?
That's right, they did. I think so. But I think it was that was the season that Madrid beat them 3-0 in the final. And even on that, just to explain how good that group was. I mean, you look at that and you think that PSV side were a really good side at that particular time. They had Van Nistelrooy up front, if I remember. They had quality, and we beat them home and away. And it was the Bayern games where, as I say, for me, we should have beat them home and away. We were the better side in both games. And that Baldi guy, that Italian referee,
Kalina.
Do you know that way you're sitting down? Everybody was talking. Just a quick one. Sorry, David. You talk. This guy was regarded as the greatest referee perhaps the world has ever seen, and he turned up at Ibrox and gave us nothing for 90 minutes. Do you remember that? And you're like, what's going on?
Yeah, although the 2 big memories of that night was Albert's doing his usual and scoring on the big occasion, and their goal was a deflection. It was just complete luck.
Came off after Newman, didn't it?
Is Chaboni playing goal that night? Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong game. No, I don't. Anyway,
I think it was.
I think for some reason I think Chaboni played in that game. I'll just quickly, just the Orange Cup final, just to finish. This was the starting 11 that day. Just to give you, see when you talk about the quality in the team. So, Klose, Reyna, Moore, Vidmar, Newman, Ferguson, Van Bronckhorst, Alberts, Kanchelskis, Dodds and Wallace. Amoruso was injured, so Arthur Newman was the captain. And you know how Aberdeen ended up having to play Robbie Winters in goals because Leighton got injured. We didn't have a goal in the bench either. The three substitutes were Perini, Tugai and McCann. So it's just as well our goalkeeper wasn't the one that got the sore face earlier on, and else I wonder who we'd have put in goals. In fact, I'm pretty sure after that game, they changed the rules in the Scottish Cup and they changed it from 3 substitutes to 5 substitutes, but one had to be a goalkeeper. I'm sure that was the final that caused the...
I think you're absolutely right there, yeah.
So that was May the 27th, and that takes us to the end of this week in history. Kenny, did you enjoy yourself?
I did, buddy, yeah. That was a proper look back down memory lane, that. The highlight for me is the wee story about the Austrian lad whose name has already escaped me, which is incredible, isn't it? That's how bad my memory is. But that's a wonderful story. But looking back on stuff that I was at and looking back at people like Jim Baxter, you know, this is what makes us Rangers fans. It makes you proud of being a Rangers fan, Davey, that we are so steeped in a great history. So thank you very much for having me on. Really enjoyed that.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So I hope folk have enjoyed it. If there's any, use the comments if you have any memories of any of the things that we've dredged up today. Finally, I'd just like to thank the sponsors: Rhino Express, Clyview Joinery, Athol Industrial Solutions, CSD Air Conditioning, Candid, and RYDC. And until next week and the next week in history, from Kenny and from myself, bye for now.
The Four Lads podcast is sponsored by Rhino Express, Clyview Joinery, Athol Industrial Solutions Limited, and CSD Air Conditioning, in partnership with Black Rooster and Art of Gold. Thank you for listening to or watching the podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.